If you have not ever laid hands on a guitar or you just got a guitar and you are trying to get started, this is the video for you. Let's call it Day One Guitar. So maybe you even got a book. And basically, I'm going to be that book because they're generally all the same. Uh, and so there's a lot of talking points here. Again, this is for somebody day one, brand new to guitar, never played guitar, and you need some help. This is going to be a long video. I'm just warning you now. Longer than most of the things I post. So, first thing they would tell you about in a book is the guitar parts. I'm going to start here. Actually, I'll start at the big part, the body of the guitar, on an acoustic and even an electric too. But oftentimes, I feel like I hear it more often than not with acoustics. They'll talk about the like a cedar top and mahogany back and sides or something. The sides are kind of obvious to the side of the guitar. The back would be the obvious back of the guitar. Sorry for the bright white light reflections, but yeah, that's that. And then moving on, basically this is the bridge, that big brown part. It might be a different color on your guitar, but that's essentially it. And then there's some other components within said bridge. The pins right there, you can clearly see are holding the strings in there. Then you have the saddle, that white bar right there, which is related to your action and intonation. Generally speaking, with an acoustic, and that word intonation, I'll speak on that again later in the video. Uh, the action has to do with how high your strings are. You can't necessarily see it in this video, but how high your strings are from the fretboard. That's also related to the neck tension. Moving on, I'm basically going to work my way up the guitar. So normally on like an electric, which I'm not having, you would have your pickups right here and the pickup selector and volume and tone knobs. But continuing on the acoustic here, the brown part, that's what we call the fretboard. And all the little dots are what you call inlays. And generally speaking, besides that double dot right here in the frame, they're all odd numbers. So typically, I'll turn it back sideways. Typically, most people's guitars or most guitars, the first dot is on 3, 5, 7, 9, and then 12. And at 12, it's a replication of the open string. So the next dot is equivalent to 3. It's basically like once you get past 12, just subtract 12 and you'll get the same thing. So that would be 15 minus 12 is 3, right? Shazam. Moving along, I'll keep the guitar like this time, but then you have the fret wire, the metal running up and down. Those are what you call the frets. An example of what it means if they say play the 5th fret, it does not mean play on the metal. You basically want to count. I'll do it that way. So there's wire 1, wire 2, wire 3, or excuse me, fret 1, fret 2, fret 3, fret 4, fret 5, i.e. the dot. You want to play generally right behind that said fret. Then moving along to the tippy top of the guitar, you got the nut of the guitar, which in all honesty, besides being added stability on the other side of the string, like the bridge is down here, I can't say that I know exactly what it's for. But on most guitars, it's kind of like a breaking point for the string, which basically is related to like sustain, i.e. like a lot of acoustics, or and Gibsons in particular, even the electrics, have a slanted headstock. See, it's not straight. I can show you another example here with a Stratocaster, how it is not angled. It's just straight all the way through. Yeah, it is related to sustain in the instrument. Oh, I skipped the sound hole. Obvious. That's where the sound comes from. But so kind of real important up here, the tuning pegs. That's where you would, turn or tighten and loosen to get your string into pitch. Speaking of, that's the next bullet point that I want to talk about is tuning. So basically, you need to know, in order to tune, you got to know what the strings are supposed to be tuned to. Which I'll go ahead and say, if you don't already know, that is starting at the string closest to you. Actually, I'm going to go in reverse, and I'll tell you why in a second. The very bottom string, that's a E, a B, a G, a D, a A, and an E. And I refer to it that way because oftentimes, again, i.e., if you got a book, they would refer to the bottom string as string 1. So that's why I did it in that order. And beyond that, speaking of tuning, there's kind of 4 different ways to go about tuning. The main one, the one that I would highly recommend, is use a actual tuner. In this case, this is a headstock tuner that I leave. If you didn't notice it earlier, you probably notice it now. Next to my capo, I leave the tuner on there. It doesn't go back in the box that it came in and into my gig bag. No, it stays on the guitar because the very first thing I do when I sit down to play is tune. And if at some point while playing on the gig or just practicing, something sounds funny, I need to check the tuning. I don't need to have to go dig in my gig bag and pull it out of the box and out of the little sock, or what, not a sock, I can't think of the word, but you know what I'm saying, another container to get it out of to tune. So yeah, it stays there. But so that would be ideal, is to have one of those. Scenario 2, actually, I'll let it segue. So another way is to tune the guitar to itself. And the way you would do that is really going back to intonation. You would be relying on knowing that your intonation was perfect. And what is intonation, William? Intonation is, say you tune the string, say with your tuner, open, and it sounded fine and dandy. But when you go to fret a note, it's flat or sharp. It's not still perfectly in tune. That means your intonation is off. Oftentimes this is contributed to, especially if you just got a new guitar, I would say it's probably because it needs to get a setup. Otherwise, it can also happen with old strings. You can't, I would say as a new player, you should be changing your strings at least once a month, especially if you're using the cheaper strings, like probably even sooner than that, depending on how much you play. But you're relying on the intonation. But the way you can do that, because the guitar is tuned in fourths for the most part, I'll get to what that means momentarily also. But the 5th fret basically is where you would transition to the next string. So 5 of the outer string is the pitch of the A string, or the next string. 5 on the A string is the pitch of the D string. 5 of the D is the pitch of the G. This is where it's switched for just this pair of strings. From the G to a B is actually a 3rd, so it's on the 4th fret, matches the next string. And then from that B string to the E string is back to 5. And I'm actually a little out of tune myself, but the other way is you can to tune it to itself is to tune based off of an open string. So actually very similar, and actually I didn't give you an example, but I will give an example now with just the 1 string. So what you're listening for really in both cases is the string to not be waving, or I say the sound to not be waving. So when it's out of tune, it's going to be whoa, 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 whoa. And as it gets in tune, it's going to go away. So i.e., oftentimes I will tune the A because I feel like I have a good sense of what A is supposed to sound like. And then from there, I'll tune the rest of the guitar, usually starting with the E string. So if it's out of tune, I'm intentionally taking it way out of tune. Like, that don't sound good, right? But let me say this too, but before I continue, oftentimes, like once you've got the guitar, up to its pitch for each string, they shouldn't be terribly off, like a whole nother note off. They're usually pretty relative. So knowing that it's off, you'll quickly figure out whether it's getting better or worse, tightening or loosening. But again, you're listening for that wave to smooth out. And actually, I'm going to use the same method because I just told you my guitar's out of tune. I'm going to use this method to tune my whole guitar. That generally sounds nice, but let's say it was sharp. You hear that wave? That's not what you want. And honestly, I know that I hear super subtleties like that. Sounds pretty good, but it's a little off. And for sake of demonstration, I'm going to keep taking them out of tune on purpose. Now, the one that's tricky to do this way is the G to the B. Because it's a chord, it's a little more difficult, I'll say that, than the others. I'm going to go with that. But so what I personally tend to do, which at the same time, if you're brand new, it's probably not a thing for you, but I would check it by way of playing a G chord, which that was telling me that it was off. See, that sounds perfect. And then I would tune the last string after that. Sounds perfect. And see, let me demonstrate too. All it takes, this is why it's important to tune. It doesn't matter that you tuned yesterday or you tuned that morning and it's now nighttime. It doesn't matter. Right before you play, you should check your tuning. Because all it takes is one string to be off. And in particular, when you're playing more than one note at a time, it's going to be obvious that something is wrong. And so you don't want to program yourself to hear and think of bad notes. You want them to be good. But look, I only changed one string. And even though it was just perfect a second ago, that one string is off. Using that same method, perfect again. So that is 3 ways there. And the final way is similar to those last two. If you were, say, with a friend and neither one of you had a tuner, one of you, whoever you feel like is more in tune, the other player would tune to that person, and you would basically there again be trying to match pitches, i.e., same kind of thing. I would generally say, hey man, give me your A, and so it would, and I would obviously need to go until it matched. Okay, cool. And me being me and showing you what I just showed you, how I can tune the guitar, to itself from that one string. And also that is not reliant on the intonation. So what I didn't say about that is when you're relying on the intonation, if the intonation is bad here, that means you're tuning the next string to be bad. And then that means as you do the next one, it's bad, it's bad, it's bad, it's bad. It's not going to sound right. In the end, when you go to strum a chord, it's not going to sound right. So, again, the ideal way, grab a tuner. Next bullet point, I want to talk about how to hold the guitar. And in that, I am going to have to adjust this camera because my chair is as high as it can go. And you can't see it. Something like this should be fine, I think. So holding the guitar, observe how I'm sitting right now. So observe the cut of the guitar. I mean, every guitar has that cut in that part. I, generally speaking, as a right-handed player, I sit that on my right leg. Feels most comfortable. The neck, generally speaking, goes straight across. Versus if you put it on your left leg, it tends to, see how it kind of organically goes up. Whatever's comfortable for you, but I'm just letting you know it does make the neck feel a little bit different. I'm going to kind of stick to this right hand side here. So observe that basically the what would you call that? Let's just call it that flexing point right there in your arm, right there on the other side of your elbow. Think about that sitting on the outside. I would say somewhere in this window, and I say somewhere in this window because I have seen small kids where they're coming over the top of the guitar, and it is not necessarily bad given their size, although it's not what I would say. I think it's really more about kind of hugging the guitar with that arm. Sorry, let me get that more in the frame for you. And then from there, it's like your hand. Notice how my hand this is just relaxed starting position. My hand kind of organically comes right in front of these bridge pins. And often, I mean, as much as this is, organic, when I actually go to play, I slide my hand back to where the bottom part of my hand is on those bridge pins. If you had an electric, it's a very similar concept. Basically, what you wouldn't want to hear, I can only mention it since I'm not playing an electric. You don't want the strings to mute, and actually kind of speaking into that now, even with an acoustic. If you put your hand on the string, let's say we're hitting this outer string. If you put your hand on the string, the note goes away, especially the farther up you are in front of that sound hole. See how the note goes away? There is this technique called palm muting, in which case touching the string is okay, but at the same time you should hear the pitch. Remember the pitch? You should hear that pitch. You hear it coming in, but it's soft, it's not wide open. And see, that was all adjusted really by sliding my hand backwards and forwards. So generally speaking, I like to start back here so I'm getting the maximum volume out of the notes. Another note about playing, I know it's super common when you're starting. Most people, they're going to use their whole arm. Look how I'm moving from my elbow. That's not what you want. Let's say I was playing that same thing, like I'm trying to exaggerate, but it's like you don't want it to come from there. You want it to come from your wrist. Notice how, again, my wrist is planted, and I'm really just, it feels like I'm just pushing down with my wrist. Small movement with the wrist. On another note, while I'm here and speaking about this right-hand side, the pick. Hold the pick. Think of your index going to the main point of the pick, and then your thumb is coming across. It's kind of like I'm holding my fingers. It's weird. This is weird to do on camera. But essentially, though, you want to choke up on the pick. Let me try turning it this way. See how small? Turn your hand. It's so awkward. I can't do it. But basically, let me try it this way. The pick should be small in your hand. That looks like it's not in focus, but hopefully you can see. You don't want a bunch of slack like this, where there's a lot of space between the tip of the pick and your thumb. You don't want that because I'm gonna try to turn sideways. Watch as I strum a chord here, this hand, how the pick is kind of doing its own thing. Look how it immediately goes up versus if I choke up on it like this is, you hardly, number one, you can't even see it. But two, I'm able to keep it just completely flat. I know that may be hard to see, but that's what you want in terms. And so for me personally, I tend to, and I'm not saying that I haven't seen people hold the pick with two fingers and play with their fingers in, and maybe even play with the two fingers I just mentioned and still play with their fingers in. I don't. I like to play with my fingers fanned out. Sometimes I'll use those other fingers. Sometimes if I'm playing something really fast, I like to have that pinky to post up on and do stuff like that. So I like to play with my fingers fanned out, but do what's comfortable. I say, but don't don't do your middle and thumb or your ring and your thumb. Make it your index and thumb, or maybe two fingers if that really suits you. Um, Generally speaking, I think that's it on that. Moving to the left side of the guitar, in your left hand, really. The main thing is to think about your thumb giving you the leverage to squeeze. So whether I was playing, actually using my, or actually, I'm skipping a part. I was saying, think of your thumb as giving you leverage to squeeze. Like, i.e., let's say I'm playing, I'll use 5 just because I used it earlier. The 5th fret, notice how my thumb and my index are in line with each other. Even if from right here I needed to go to fret 7, notice my ring finger squeeze now. But notice where my thumb is. I do have my index away, but if I were to bring it back, it's like my thumb is still there and upright. It should not be over the top. I see this lots of times. It shouldn't be over the top like this trying to play. And it should not be coming from the bottom of the guitar into the front side of the guitar trying to play. Another note, because I actually recently had somebody mention this, although I've never had anybody ask me. They were asking me about the left hand. To me, the way it feels, it's hard to show. I guess if I turn sideways, I can show you. To me, the approach is this arm should be straight. Again, kind of relaxed position. It's like that elbow should kind of hit your body. And this arm is straight, and my wrist is straight. I'm not doing any sort of weird thing here with my wrist, cocking it weird ways. It just approaches straight now. And then the thumb is there upright, ready to go. That's the basics of holding the guitar. Beyond that, lastly, commonly, I'll bring it back up here a little bit. Commonly, hold on, sorry. It's morning where I'm at right now. Coffee, yes, please. Sorry, real life moment there. What was I going to say? Oh, commonly in the books, they tend to start you on, and you could, if you got the book, you can confirm in the comments. It'll start you on the bottom E string and tell you to play F on 1 with your pointing finger, and G on 3 with your ring finger, and then they'll start to give you different patterns and whatnot going between those notes. That's fine and dandy, I guess. But in my musical education as a youngster, man, we sure did play a lot of major scales every day. And I didn't realize it at the time, but as I have gotten older and become a teacher and such, I realize why it's so important. The major scale is the foundation of all things music. And I mean, every genre, it's kind of, you can find it within. I'm not going to get into that super duper deep, but basically saying is kind of first thing maybe you should learn is the major scale. And actually, I'm gonna first time for a video for me anyway on YouTube, I'm gonna go over that in 1 string, 2 strings, and a 3 string pattern. But actually, before I get there, let's back up a little bit. So to talk about a little bit about the layout of the guitar, basically there's 12 keys in music. That is why that double dot, the one that's fret 12, I just told you it's 12 keys in music, and the double dot is an octave, which means that you have passed every note in the musical alphabet. If we didn't talk about that already, that's A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and it starts back over at A. There's sharps and flats associated with most of those. There's no sharp or flat between B and C, and there's no sharp or flat between E and F. Other than that, there's a sharp and a flat to it. That being said, the guitar, as far as going left and right, is constructed by way of half steps. So a half step means a 1 fret movement. A whole step would mean a 2 fret movement. So, i.e., open to 1 is what? half, open to 2, whole. So first thing I want you to do, I'm going to mention the notes. You don't have to latch on to them at the same time in the grand scheme of things. Another side note, I would say one of the hardest parts about guitar is learning the notes. So, but don't worry with that. That's not the point. Right now, I know you just want to get moving. So let's go through playing every fret here on this outer string, and I'm going to say the note. You can retain it if you like. Open string is E. Fret 1, remember, play right behind the wire, not on top of it. That's an F. And also remember that that thumb is giving you the leverage to squeeze. So use it. Squeeze. If the note comes out like, that means you're not squeezing. Squeeze it. F is 1. F sharp is 2. Side note, if something is sharp, that means it's the next letter of the alphabet flat. Or vice versa. If something is flat, it's the previous letter of the alphabet sharp. So F sharp is equivalent to G flat. 3 is G. 4 is G sharp or A flat. 5 is A. 6 is A sharp or B flat. 7 is B. No sharp or flat. So 8 is C. 9 is C sharp or D flat. 10 is D. 11 is D sharp or E flat. And 12 is E again. Those are all possible notes that you could play when playing music. And when I say all possible, I mean, yes, we have a lot more strings. We'll get into that momentarily. So a major scale is a combination of whole steps and half steps. So the movement here is going to be 0, 2, 4, 5, 7, 9, 11, 12. So 0 to 2, you got a whole step movement. 2 to 4, you got another whole step movement. 4 to 5, you got a half step movement. 5 to 7, you have a whole step. 7 to 9, whole step. 9 to 11, whole step. 11 to 12, half step. And obviously, I'm only doing it ascending, but yes, do it backwards too. Now you can't say I didn't go backwards too. So one of the more difficult things I would say about guitar is learning the fretboard. I mean, we just talked about going left and right in half steps. I mentioned earlier the guitar is tuned in fourths. So what that means is well, actually, I want to back up. The notes or learning the notes is hard, and I wanted to just speak into, if you were looking on like if you were previously a piano player or a saxophone player and you use, treble clef staff music, it's different. If you saw a middle C on a piano especially, there's only one middle C, like for that range on the staff. With guitar, that could be literally 5 places. So with guitar, you would generally be looking at guitar tab, which would tell you specifics of where to play. So here, basically, let's now make that 1-string pattern a 2-string pattern. So I was saying that the guitar is tuned in fourths. Observe 1, 2, 3, 4. That's the 4th note. That's what we mean by 4. That's the next string. We talked about that earlier. So what that means is that I could make it a 2-string pattern as early as changing at the A note. So instead, to make it 2, and again, this is one way, there's other ways, but let's use this one. 0, 2, 4. Instead of playing 5, let's go straight to the open of the 2nd string, and then 2, 4 again, and then it'll finish with 6, 7. Observe that here, I would throw this out there now. It's a common finger usage to index and ring. Observe that I was basically playing 2 with my index, 4 with my ring, even on the next string. And then from there, I finish using the same finger, ring and ring. Try to follow that. So that would be 2 strings. Same thing, same pitches. So, lastly, in long-term playing, understanding how to do it in 3 strings is ideal because it's efficient. It requires less movement. So to play it in 3 strings, because ultimately we're going to need to play 1 and 2 on the next string, I'm going to this time, for this particular shape, I would recommend instead of using index and ring, try using your middle and pinky to ultimately, so your index is naturally there for the 1. So same frets again as you just played, 0, 2, 4, 2, excuse me, 0, 2, 4, 0, 2, 4. Then here we go with the 1 on the D, and then middle on the 2. 2, 1, 4, 2, open, 4, 2, open. Lastly, I don't think that I mentioned already. I'm mentioning it now. Commonly, just even going back to my, band days in middle and high school, you would play a arpeggio after, which would be the first note, the third note, the fifth note, and a octave in a straight line. That would be 0, 4, 7, 12. In the 2 strings, it would be 0, 4, 2, 7. In the 3 strings, it would be 0, 4, 2, 2. And I will mention now, but we will talk about it later, that those intervals, 1, 3, and 5, are what make up a basic chord. If I were to put those together, again, I'm not going into it super deep, but 1, I'm just going to play everything up an octave. The 3, and then the 5. If I put those 3 notes together, that makes a chord. So that's kind of why it's important. So yeah, I'm going to conclude right there. I hope this was helpful. I know it was a long video. I told you it was going to be a long video. But if it helps you in any way, please do like, comment, and subscribe. That'd be super sick. Till we meet again, rock on.